There is a single afternoon in modern financial history when doing everything right became the single most dangerous decision a man could make. And almost nobody who lived through it has ever been told why. Not why the market fell. Everyone knows that part. Why the men who followed every rule were the ones who got destroyed, while the reckless ones, the ones who kept cash under a mattress and trusted nobody, walked away untouched. That inversion is not an accident of history. It is the entire point of the story you are about to hear, and it is still happening to you right now, today, in a form you have been trained not to recognize. Let me tell you about a man named Harold. Harold was 58 years old in the fall of 1987. He had spent 30 years as a mechanical engineer for a manufacturing firm outside Cleveland. He did not gamble. He did not chase hot stocks. He met with a broker twice a year, a man in a good suit who used words like diversification and balanced portfolio, and told Harold that spreading his retirement across stocks, bonds, and mutual funds was the responsible thing to do, the mature thing, the thing a careful man does instead of gambling everything on one bet. Harold believed him. Harold had billed $412,000 over 3 decades of overtime shifts and skipped vacations, and every dollar of it sat exactly where a financial professional told him it should sit. On the 19th of October, 1987, in the span of one trading session, Harold watched 22% of that number disappear. Not over a bad year. Not over a bad quarter. In one afternoon, here is what nobody explained to Harold, then or ever. The diversification he trusted was not built to protect him. It was built to keep his money in motion, inside a system that needed his money in motion. And when that system seized up, his savings did not slowly leak away. They were vaporized by machines executing trades faster than any human broker could pick up a phone and warn him. Harold did not lose his retirement to bad luck. He lost it to a mechanism he was never shown, sold to him by men who profited whether the mechanism protected him or not. You know a Harold. You might be a Harold. Maybe not from 1987 specifically, but from your own version of that afternoon, whatever year it landed on you. The moment when you did the responsible thing, the diversified thing, the thing every advisor and every article and every well-meaning colleague told you to do, and the system rewarded your discipline by taking a chunk of your life away in an afternoon, while you sat there with no idea what had just happened or why. That is what this is really about. Not 1987. You, the system does not punish recklessness. It punishes trust. And it has been running this same play for longer than you have been alive. Now, walk with me back to that specific Monday, because the mechanics of what happened are not ancient history. They are the blueprint for how the machine still operates against you today, just wearing a different suit. By the middle of the 1980s, a new kind of financial product had taken over the trading floors of New York. It was called portfolio insurance, and it was sold to large institutional investors, pension funds, insurance companies, the very entities managing money for men like Harold as a mathematical guarantee. The pitch was elegant. Computers would automatically sell a small portion of stock holdings the moment prices started to dip, locking in protection before losses could compound, and buy back in once things stabilized. It sounded like a safety net woven out of mathematics instead of trust. Wall Street loved it because it let the biggest players take on more risk with the appearance of less risk attached. And for a while, it worked exactly as advertised, which is precisely what made it dangerous. Nobody questions a system while it is winning. On that Monday in October, Prices began to slide, modestly at first, the kind of dip that in an ordinary year would have simply been absorbed. But portfolio insurance did not react like a cautious human weighing context. It reacted like a machine executing a formula. As prices dropped, the computer sold. As the computer sold, prices dropped further. As prices dropped further, more computers tuned to nearly identical formulas, because nearly every major institution had bought the same product from the same handful of firms, triggered their own sell orders at almost the exact same moment. It was not one crash. It was thousands of nearly identical decisions made by machines instead of men, cascading into each other inside a single trading day. Each one convinced it was the responsible move, each one making the disaster measurably worse. By the closing bell, the Dow Jones Industrial Average had fallen more than 500 points in a single session, a drop of roughly 22%, the worst single-day percentage decline the modern American stock market had ever recorded. Something in the neighborhood of $500 billion in paper wealth was erased before dinner. Telephone lines into brokerage firms jammed so completely that some investors could not reach a human being to even ask what was happening to their own money while it was happening. The mechanism is identical today. Only the names have changed. You do not carry a 1980s portfolio insurance contract. You carry something that behaves exactly the same way, wearing a friendlier name. Your 401k, your target date fund, your robo-advisor rebalancing your account automatically while you sleep. These are the grandchildren of that same 1987 machine. Automated systems built by institutions, executing formulas on your behalf, formulas you did not write, do not fully understand, and cannot pause when the formula turns against you. You were told this automation protects you from your own emotions. Nobody mentioned that it also removes your ability to intervene the moment the machine decides, correctly or not, that today is the day to sell. Think about what that actually means for a man your age. You spent decades building a number. That number now lives inside a system that can move without you, faster than you, and without asking your permission first. And here is the part that should make you angry. The people who designed portfolio insurance in 1987 did not lose their jobs after the crash. The firms that sold it kept selling variations of it for years. The institutions took no personal loss that mattered. The retirement accounts of ordinary men like Harold, absorbed the damage instead, because the machine was built to protect the institution's exposure first, and the individual saver's exposure a distant second, if at all. That is not a conspiracy. Nobody needs a conspiracy when the design does the work on its own. It is just engineering. Engineering that happens to point in one direction, and it is not your direction. Let me show you the mechanism from a different angle, because there is a second kind of man this same afternoon destroyed, and his story proves this was never personal. It was structural. His name was Frank. Frank was a regional sales manager, 49 years old, and unlike Harold, Frank was not the cautious type. Frank believed in professional management. He handed his savings to a well-regarded mutual fund, paid the fee, and trusted a team of credentialed managers to make smarter decisions than he ever could alone. Frank did not check his statements weekly. He did not need to. That was the entire point of paying someone else to watch it for him. When the crash hit, Frank's fund was forced into something few investors understood existed: a wave of redemption requests from other panicked shareholders pulling their money out all at once, which forced the fund's managers to sell holdings at the worst possible moment, simply to raise cash and meet those withdrawals, regardless of whether selling made any sense for the people, like Frank, who had not asked to withdraw a single dollar. Frank did nothing wrong. Frank made no emotional trade. Frank's forced loss was manufactured entirely by the behavior of strangers he had never met, transmitted to him through a structure he trusted, precisely because he had been told not to think about it. Harold lost his savings by trusting a broker's formula. Frank lost his by trusting a fund's structure. Two different mistakes, if you can even call trust a mistake, and one identical outcome. That is not bad luck striking twice. That is a design flaw striking exactly as designed, twice, on two men who never met each other and never made the same decision. Here is the part that should keep you up at night. The lesson both men's stories teach is not that they should have picked a different broker or a different fund. The lesson is that being inside the system at all, in the ordinary, responsible, recommended way, was the exposure itself. The men who came through October of 1987 untouched were not the smartest men in the room. They were the men with no leverage against them, no forced redemption schedule working against their timeline, no automated formula selling on their behalf while they slept. They were, in the language nobody uses out loud, judgment-proof. Untouchable, not because they predicted the crash, but because the crash had nothing of theirs to seize. That is the real inheritance of 1987, and it has nothing to do with picking better stocks. Here is the part that's going to make you uncomfortable, because it does not stop at money. The same men who understood this, who structured their lives so the system had no leverage over them, carried themselves differently in every room they walked into. Not louder, quieter, a man who owes nothing, who cannot be margin called, who cannot be forced to liquidate, who cannot be pressured by a lender or a creditor because there is no lender and no creditor. That man commands a room without raising his voice, because he needs nothing from anyone in it. You have met men like this. You have watched a room defer to someone who barely spoke and wondered what he had that you did not. The answer was never charisma. It was math. He simply had nothing left for anyone to take. That is why the code that used to be common among men, your father's age, steady, composed, unbothered, quietly confident, has all but disappeared from most rooms you walk into now. It did not vanish because men stopped valuing it. It vanished because fewer and fewer men are actually in the financial position that produces it honestly. You cannot fake untouchable. Debt shows on the face, eventually, one way or another, and so does its absence. So what do you do with all of this, sitting where you're sitting right now? Closer to the end of your working years than the beginning of them. You stop asking which fund, which broker, which strategy would have saved Harold or Frank. That was never the real question. The real question is whether you are, right now, positioned the way the untouched men were positioned in 1987. Judgment-proof, debt-free, or close enough to it, that a bad afternoon anywhere in the market cannot touch your household. Nothing pledged as collateral that a falling number could force out of your hands. A financial life quiet enough that no institution's formula has any authority over your income, your home, or your peace of mind at 2 a.m. That is not a strategy you buy from a broker in a good suit. It is closer to a discipline you build by refusing leverage, refusing the minimum payment, refusing the comfortable, recommended, diversified exposure that every well-meaning voice around you insists is simply what a responsible man does. I laid out 180 ideas like this one, encoded as puzzles rather than lectures. in a book called Financial Invisibility, built for men who would rather solve the answer than be told it. Link in the description. Harold rebuilt, eventually, the way men of his generation always seem to rebuild. Slowly, quietly, without applause. But he tells the story differently now than he would have in 1987. He does not talk about the broker who failed him. He talks about the decade afterward, when he paid off everything, carried no balance anywhere, and never once let an institution hold a piece of paper with his name and a number owed on it again. He says the crash did not teach him to fear the market. It taught him to fear needing anything from it. That is the only lesson in this entire story worth carrying with you when you turn this off. Not a stock pick, not a fund, a posture. Own nothing that can be called in. Owe nothing that can be called due. Need nothing from a room, a lender, or a machine executing a formula you never saw written. Choose invisibility. Choose silence. Choose stealth. Can't margin call a man with no margin. Can't foreclose on a man with no mortgage. Can't repossess what was never financed. Can't touch what was never exposed. The market did not break Harold. His trust in the system did. And a man who has finally stopped needing anything from that system is the one man it can never touch again.